Technique, bringing you the truth in the form of hip-hop. From Death Row, this is Mumia Abu Jamal.
Welcome back to Bars on Wax, where we dig through the history of music and hip-hop. Today we're stepping away from gaming and going underground, deep into one of the most controversial, politically charged, and influential albums of the early 2000s. Immortal Technique Revolutionary Volume 2, released in 2003, this wasn't your typical rap album. There was no major label executives, no polished pop formula, no attempt to make everybody comfortable. Instead, Immortal Technique took political anger, street experiences, history, conspiracy theories, poverty, war, media criticism, and underground hip-hop and tuned it all into one intense record. So today we're asking, who was Immortal Technique? How was Revolutionary Volume 2 made? What were the stories behind the songs? How successful was it? And most importantly, why are people still talking about this album more than 20 years later? Before we get into Revolutionary Volume 2, we need to understand the men behind the microphone. Because Immortal Technique didn't simply wake up one day and decide to become a political rapper. His worldview was shaped by Peruvian migration, Harlem, poverty, street life, family, conflict, and eventually incarceration. So let's go back to the beginning. Immortal Technique was born Felipe Andres Coronel on February 19, 1978, in Lima, Peru. He was born in a military hospital and his family left Peru when he was about 2 years old. Moving to Harlem, New York, his family move happened during a turbulent period in Peru's history. His family has described leaving because of the violence and instability surrounding the conflict in Peru. So Technique's childhood was split between two worlds, Peru then Harlem. That contrast would become extremely important to his music.
You know, if you come here, you can win the lottery. If you work really hard, you can win the lottery. And when you go to business school, they'll tell you something very honest. They'll say, hey, if you made $1,000 from the day that Christ was crucified until today, you still wouldn't have a third of Bill Gates' money. So is it really working hard? Is it really got to come here and work hard? Or do you have to come here and find a residual income and then build on your own and then plan with your family and then do things like that? Well, if that's what you want to do, then why didn't you tell me to do that in the first place? No, you sent me to these wonderful liberal institutions. I went to one of the best schools in New York City. I went to Hunter College High School. My sister went to Bronx Science. My cousin went to Stuyvesant. My other cousin went to Brooklyn Tech. In none of these schools, none of these fucking genius academies did they ever give us any economic education. And they didn't even tell us not to get the credit card that charged you 30% out of the university that you ended up going to, that gave you a free t-shirt. So fuck you. That's how I feel about them. They didn't do their job.
Technique grew up in Harlem during the 1980s and 90s, a period when New York City was dealing with enormous social problems. There was poverty, drug epidemics, violence, police brutality, and struggling communities dealing with limited opportunities. In a later interview, Immortal Technique described growing up in Harlem and seeing drugs, violence, hatred, and police brutality around him. He also talked about returning to Peru and seeing poverty there.
And the reality is that, sure, I definitely was pretty fucked up to some people in high school, but I used to fight a lot of people from outside high school because we went to Hunter and people thought that everybody in Hunter was soft. So it was like, no, this little fishbowl has a few piranhas in it and I'm going to show you how nasty it can be. So I used to carry a gun and a knife with me. And, you know, I'm not proud to say, did you ever have to bring a gun to school? Yeah, I didn't keep it in school, but it was definitely close by. And when I needed that shit, I had it. And it was fucked up. I think back to that era of my life, and I really wish I could talk to myself. But I believe then a version of what I believe now, obviously with a much more mature approach, but I always believed that it was better to be a warrior in a garden than a gardener in a war. So I was like, look, I had a teacher come up to me one time and he said, you know, Felipe, do you really have a gun in school? I told him without getting into too much detail. Not for nothing, but somebody tried to stab me the other day. And then we were gonna do this shit in the park near a place called The Circle. Somebody took a shot at me there. So I'm like, yo, what do you want me to do? Pretend that shit didn't happen? You want me to pretend that shit didn't happen? You want me to just get along like it's gonna be cool? You want me to run to the police to help me? Right, the same police that came to my school and told me, hey, you should report it when drug dealers deal drugs. Okay, well, what happens when I see the cops beat up the drug dealers and take their drugs, but they don't arrest them? And that nigga got real quiet and moved on to the next question. Because that's exactly how hard. What, you want me to go to these extortionists? No, I'm going to take care of my own goddamn problems. And looking back, I wish I had made other decisions in life, because I feel like that violence led me down the wrong path. I started to think that that was what made me powerful. That didn't make me powerful. This made me powerful.
Giving him experiences with American urban poverty and poverty in Peru, and that combination would become one of the defining characteristics of his music. He wasn't simply looking at America from the perspective of someone born here. He had a connection to Latin America. He was an immigrant. He was raised in Harlem, and he experienced the contrast between the United States and the country his family came from. That perspective would eventually become central to his songs dealing with colonialism, immigration, poverty, American foreign policy, and economic inequality. Immortal Technique began experimenting with rap when he was around 9 years old, but he didn't immediately become the political rapper the world would eventually know him for. He was a kid growing up in New York, and like many young MCs, he eventually became interested in competitive side of hip-hop, freestyling, battling, writing rhymes, trying to out-rap the person standing across from him. His serious commitment to rap developed more during his teenage years and high school. And this is important because when you eventually hear the aggression on Revolutionary Volume 2, you're hearing somebody who came from battle rap. Technique wasn't simply trying to make political poetry, he wanted to destroy the microphone. Technique's teenage years weren't easy. He has openly discussed getting into trouble and making what he later described as immature and selfish decisions. He attended Hunter College High School in Manhattan, and despite his difficult teenage years, he was academically capable enough to eventually attend Penn State University. But his problems didn't disappear when he went to college. Instead, they followed him. After an altercation at Penn State, he was arrested and eventually spent approximately a year incarcerated. And that period would become one of the biggest turning points of his life.
I was a latchkey kid, so both my parents worked, and I had to come home and make dinner for myself sometimes and pick up my sister. And, I had a job when I was 12, so I always had money in my pocket, or I stole shit. And when I didn't have money, I stole shit. And I used to be a really good thief when I was a kid. So sometimes I go in the
when
store,
he had money, he still stole shit.
just went like that, you know what I mean? I'm not. Listen, don't do that. I'm so ignorant. I won't do anything.
Tutorials.
But I learned the hard way not to steal. And I always tell people, I learned not to steal not by going to prison, but I was already in prison. Whenever I was about to jump the turnstile, or whenever I was on parole doing some stupid shit. And I'm gonna be honest with you, I haven't stolen a goddamn thing since then. I can't. I don't owe anybody money right now. Nobody can look at this camera. Matter of fact, a lot of y'all niggas owe me money out there. When I got out of prison, my entire life was in a bag. Everything. So whatever comics I had, whatever fucking sneakers, everything, gone. Everything. Every fucking thing that I owned was in a garbage bag that I took out of prison. That my mom made me burn all that shit anyway. So, yeah.
Here's where the story gets particularly important. While incarcerated, Technique began seriously developing his writing. He wasn't just writing battle rhymes anymore, he was reading, thinking, studying history, and becoming interested in revolutionary figures and political movements. He studied figures such as Malcolm X, Che Guevara, during his period while developing his songwriting. That experience helped transform his relationship with hip-hop. Before prison, rap could be about competition. Afterward, it became something much bigger, a way to communicate, a way to document what he believed was happening around him, and eventually, a political weapon.
Right? The way the right-wingers or Latino right-wingers will cheer Vladimir Putin, but then at the same time realize, yes, in Europe they support the far right, but in Latin America, half these republics wouldn't exist without the support of Russia and China. So they play you left and right. The United States is getting smacked on both sides. The Russians have learned, okay, we support these far right movements. Marine Le Pen is right there with Mr. Putin, right? But then so is Hugo Chavez, so is Nicolas Maduro. And you're over here dick riding the duopoly still. That's the problem with the American public. They're stuck in that mentality. They don't realize that people outside this country are playing 3D chess, and you're still arguing that Mr. Trump was sent by God. And it's just stupid and it's nonsensical. And if the imaginary communist takeover is a Red Scare in the United States from the Democrats, then what is the end result? What is the trajectory of right-wing politics? It's a theocracy. It's the theory of the 7 mountains. And for people who are unaware of that, they should look it up. It's the idea that they're going to reclaim 7 major parts of society: military, economics, entertainment, education, etc., and push them towards a more religious base. Now, it's always framed nicely, right? We want to put God back in the schools. We want to get kids to do right. But the danger of combining church and state, I think, goes beyond what the founding fathers had in mind. It's not so much that just the church will influence the state. No, it's the state that now will even more so pollute the word of God for people who have not had it polluted by religious institutions. In other words, it's no longer America's war now, Abby. It's God's war. Well, we're not killing these people because we want to. It's because God told us that this war is necessary. God made this foundation. God is the justification for that. So now you have an easy out clause for every atrocity that you commit.
After his release and parole in the late 1990s, Immortal Technique returned to New York. He worked various jobs, but at night, he was battling MCs. And this is where Immortal Technique began building the reputation that would eventually lead to Revolutionary Volume 2 and 1. He wasn't coming into the industry with a major label contract. He was going into the streets, going into clubs, and going into underground battles and proving himself one MC at a time. His battle rap background became one of the greatest weapons because Technique could take a political argument and deliver it with the aggression of a battle rapper. That's a huge reason why his music sounded so different. Now we can start connecting the dots. Peru gave him a connection to Latin American history and poverty. Harlem exposed him to American urban life. Battle rap taught him aggression and lyrical competition. Person gave him time to write and study, and his experiences afterwards gave him the subject matter. Put all that together and you get more technique. That's why Revolutionary Volume 2 isn't simply an album about politics. It's an album created by somebody whose life has already exposed him to radically different worlds. And when he started looking at American politics, economics, war, and history, he wasn't looking at those subjects from only one perspective. He was looking at them through the eyes of someone who was born in Peru, raised in Harlem, an underground battle rapper, a former prisoner, and eventually an independent political artist.
Drove around the project slow while it was raining, smoking blunts, drinking and joking for entertainment.
And that brings us to 2003. By this point, Immortal Technique had already released Revolutionary Volume 1, and that established himself within New York's underground hip-hop scene. Then came Revolutionary Volume 2, and now all those experiences, Peru, Harlem, the streets, battle rap, prison, political study, history, and frustration with powerful institutions all came together. This wasn't just another underground rap album. It was Immortal Technique taking everything he had experienced and everything he believed and putting it into wax. And that's where the real story of Revolutionary Volume 2 begins. To understand this album, you have to understand the year it came out. 2003. America was still living in the aftermath of September 11th. The United States was fighting the war on terror. The invasion of Iraq had just begun. The Patriot Act had expanded government surveillance powers. The Bush administration was under intense political debate. And Americans were arguing terrorism, civil liberties, war, propaganda, and government power. Immortal Technique looked at all that and basically said, let's talk about it. But he wasn't interested in making a political album that sounded like a lecture. He wanted to sound dangerous, dark, aggressive, underground, and that's exactly what Revolutionary Volume 2 became.
The voice of racism, preaching the gospel is devilish. A fake church called the Prophet Muhammad a terrorist.
One of the most interesting things about Revolutionary Volume 2 is how independent it was. This wasn't a major label blockbuster. Technique released it through his own Viper Records operation. The production was handled by several underground producers including Southpaw, Danger Mao, Metaphysics, Domingo, Omen, and 44 Caliber. That gave the album different sounds while maintaining consistent underground atmosphere. The beats were dark, the drums were hard, there were cinematic samples, there were movie clips, and the production often sounded like a soundtrack to a political documentary. Technique's lyrics were the centerpiece. The beats weren't trying to overpower him, they were giving him the stage.
lock and load. This is the point of no return, I can never go back. Life without parole, upstate, shackled and trapped. Living in the hole, looking at the world through a crack. But fuck that, I'd rather shoot it out and get clapped. I've gone too far, there ain't no coming back for me. Auschwitz gas chamber full of Zyklon B. Just like the Spanish exterminating Tainos, raping the black and Indian women, creating Latinos. Motherfucker.
Now let's talk about one of the album's defining tracks, The Point of No Return. This is Immortal Technique at full power. The song deals with political violence, history, racism, war, and American foreign policy. But what makes Technique different is the density of his lyrics. You don't just listen to the song, you study it, you rewind it, you catch one reference, then another, and you're suddenly looking something up because you want to know, wait, was this actually true? And that's an important part of listening to Immortal Technique. His music frequently mixes documented history with interpretation, political argument, controversial claims, and conspiracy ideas. So listeners should investigate the claims rather than automatically accepting or rejecting everything. And that's what makes the album so interesting.
Heard whispers about the financial support your government receives from the drug industry.
Well, the irony of this, of course, is that this money, which is in the billions, is coming from your country. You see, you are the major purchaser of our national product, which is, of course, cocaine.
On one hand, you're saying the United States government is spending millions of dollars to eliminate the flow of drugs onto our streets.
Now we get into one of the album's most ambitious tracks, Peruvian Cocaine. Technique brings another several underground MCs and turns the song into almost a miniature movie. The subject, the international cocaine trade. Like Technique isn't simply talking about people selling drugs on the street corner. He's looking at the larger system, South America, drug production, American demand, money, politics, corruption. The song asks a bigger question. Who really benefits from the drug trade? That's one of the recurring themes of Revolutionary Volume 2. Don't just look at the person at the bottom of the system, look at the entire system.
Yeah, nigga. Immortal Technique. Metaphysics. The bling bling era was cute, but it's about to be done. I'll leave you full of clips like the moon blocking the sun. My metaphors are dirty like herpes, but harder to catch. Like an escape tunnel in prison. I started from scratch, and now these parasites want a percent of your own.
If you're trying to understand Immortal Technique as a lyricist, Industrial Revolution is essential. The song attacks capitalism, corporate power, exploitation, racism, history, and commercialization. And this wasn't just something underground fans appreciated. The source recognized Industrial Revolution as a hip-hop quotable in 2003. Think about that, an independent rapper with no major label machine behind him was getting major recognition from one of hip-hop's greatest publications. That's when people started realizing this guy wasn't going away.
Yeah. The voice of racism, preaching the gospel is devilish. A fake church called the Prophet Muhammad a terrorist. Forgetting God is not religion, but a spiritual bond. And Jesus is the most quoted prophet in the Quran. They bombed innocent people, trying to murder Saddam. When you gave them those chemical weapons to go to war with Iran. This is the information that they hold back from Peter Jennings.
Now we get into one of the most famous songs in Technique's catalog, The Fourth Branch. The title refers to Technique's idea of the mainstream media as another powerful institution alongside the traditional branches of government. He attacks corporate media propaganda, government narratives, war coverage, political influence, and this is where the album becomes particularly controversial. Technique makes extremely strong claims. Some are rooted in documented historical events, others are interpretations. Others remain disputed or unproven. That's why this album works best when you listen to it critically. Don't just ask, do I agree? Ask, what's the evidence?
And it really comes down, I think, to the differences or the lack of differences that exist between the Democratic and the Republican Party. You know, the difference are minimal, and I think more illusory than real. One addresses you in a certain tone, another curses at you and spits on you. But ultimately, both of them are parties that have sold their souls, to wealth, to big business. Some just more blatantly than others. Neither of them really have a vision that really talks to average folk and that betters their life, because I think ultimately both parties recognize that America is in an economic downturn, spiral, a quasi-depression. A depression that affects the poor and the working class, but a depression that enriches the wealthy and those who, are trading on Wall Street.
Another major feature of the album is Mumia Abu Jamal. He appears at the beginning of the album.
You're listening to Immortal Technique, bringing you the truth in the form of hip-hop. From Death Row, this is Mumia Abu Jamal.
And on Homeland and Hip Hop.
Homeland and Hip Hop. To think about the origins of hip-hop in this culture, and also about homeland security, is to see that there are, at the very least, two worlds in America. One of the well-to-do and another of the struggling. For if ever there was the absence of homeland security, it is seen in the gritty roots of hip-hop. For the music arises from a generation that feels, with some justice, that they have been betrayed by those who came before them. That they are, at best, tolerated in schools, feared on the streets, and almost inevitably destined for the hellholes of prison. They grew up hungry, hated, and unloved. And this is the psychic fuel that generates the anger that seems endemic in much of the music and poetry. One senses very little hope above the personal goals of wealth to climb above the pit of poverty. In the broader society, the opposite is true. For here, more than any other place on earth, wealth is so widespread and so bountiful that what passes for the middle class in America could pass for the upper class in most of the rest of the world. Their very opulence and relative wealth makes them insecure and
his inclusion wasn't random. Mumia had become one of the most controversial figures in American debates surrounding political prisoners, criminal justice, police, freedom of speech, and government power. By placing his voice on the record, Technique connected Revolutionary Volume 2 to a much larger political tradition. Hip-hop wasn't simply entertainment, but it could also be political speech.
They told me I would never make it, I would never achieve it. Reality is nourishment, but people don't believe it. I guess it's hard to stomach the truth like a bulimic. It's a dirty game and nobody is willing to clean it. But this is for the paraplegic, people dreaming and running. Ladies married to men who don't please them, dreaming of coming. Verbally murderous like David Berkowitz when I'm gunning. Some cowards on the internet didn't think I would sell.
But here's something people sometimes overlook. Revolutionary Volume 2 isn't only politics. There are moments where Technique becomes much more personal. Take a leave in the past. Instead of focusing entirely on governments and corporations, Technique reflects on his own life, his experiences, his past, his struggles, his growth. Then there's You Never Know, featuring Jean Grey.
Was on her way to becoming a college graduate. Wouldn't even stop to talk to the average kid. The type of Latina I'd sit and contemplate marriage with. Fuck the horse and carriage shit, her love was never for hire. Disciplined intellectual beauty's what I desire. Flyer than Selma Hayek or Jennifer Lopez. Everyone told me kicking it to her was hopeless. At first I just thought
That's another emotional change of pace. It deals more with relationships and vulnerability. These songs are important because they show that behind all the political anger was an actual person. A person with memories, pain, relationships, and personal experiences. Sonically, Revolutionary Volume 2 sounds like the underground. Dark samples, boom bap drums, cinematic dialogue, heavy bass, and grimy production. The album doesn't sound like the polished mainstream rap 2003. That's the intention. Technique wasn't trying to make a record that belonged in the top 40 radio. He wanted something that sounded like it came from a basement studio, a cypher, or the underground of New York. And that rawness became part of the album's identity.
It's like Cambodia, the killing fields uptown. We live in distress and hang the flag upside down. The sound of conservative politicians on television. People in the hood are blind, so they tell us to listen. They vote for us to go to war instantly, but none of their kids serve in the infantry. The odds are stacked against us like a casino. Think about it, most of the army is black and Latino. And if
Now here's where the story gets interesting. Revolutionary Volume 2 wasn't a massive billboard or chart blockbuster. It didn't have major label marketing campaign behind it, but Technique built something arguably more valuable, a dedicated fanbase. Technique later cited selling more than 85,000 copies of the album. For an independent release underground hip-hop album, that was significant. And remember the era. This was before Spotify, before TikTok, before YouTube became the music discovery machine it is today. People were buying CDs, going to shows, passing music around, and telling their friends, hey, you need to hear this guy. That word-of-mouth strategy helped Immortal Technique build a career without surrendering control to a major label.
and I'm gonna be 100% frank with y'all. The record label does a lot of things for people. It buys them beats, it buys them studio time, it pays for cars, it buys them video spots, it buys them radio play, and let's keep it real, it buys them women, it buys them coke, it buys them weed, it buys them cars, it buys them chains, it buys them watches, and sometimes they even pay for other people to write the verses for you. So all you really did was go in there in the booth and spit a verse that somebody else wrote for you, somebody else designed for you, and you expect to get paid a lot for that? Get the fuck out of here, yo. If you gonna act like a puppet, then don't be mad when somebody put their fucking hand up your ass. I don't have that problem, because I'm nobody's puppet. I control me.
Here's a quotable for every single record exec. Get your fucking hands out my pocket, nigga, like Malcolm X.
Now we have to talk about the other side, because Revolutionary Volume 2 isn't a comfortable album. Technique uses extreme aggressive language. There are controversial political claims, there are conspiracy theories, and there are violent images. So why does Revolutionary Volume 2 still matter? Because Immortal Technique proved something. You didn't necessarily need a major label. You didn't need corporate radio. You didn't need a giant marketing campaign. You could build your own audience and sell your own music, tour, create controversy, build a reputation, and maintain creative independence. In many ways, that philosophy predicted the independent internet music revolution that came later. Bandcamp, YouTube, streaming, social media, independent artists building their own audiences. Technique was already following that philosophy years before those platforms became dominant. So where does Revolutionary Volume 2 rank? For underground hip-hop, it's absolutely one of the defining records of the early 2000s. It's aggressive, it's uncomfortable, it's intelligent, it's controversial, and sometimes it's deliberately provocative. But most importantly, it makes you think. Whether you agree with Immortal Technique or completely disagree with him, the album demands a response. You might hear a historical reference and start researching it. You might hear a political argument and start debating it. You might hear conspiracy theory and ask whether there's actual evidence behind it. And that's ultimately the power of the record. It doesn't simply tell you what to think. It challenges you to question what you're being told. And that's why more than 20 years later, people are still putting on Revolutionary Volume 2, still rewinding the verses, still arguing about the lyrics, and still asking the same questions. What if there's more to the story? And that brings us to the end of our deep dive into Immortal Technique and Revolutionary Volume 2. From his childhood in Lima, Peru, to growing up in Harlem, from battling MCs in the underground to spending time incarcerated, Technique's life experiences helped him shape the artist he would become. And Revolutionary Volume 2 became more than just an album. It became a snapshot of the early 2000s, America, a time of war, political division, media, controversy, and growing distrust of powerful institutions. You don't have to agree with every claim Immortal Technique makes, but that's what makes part of the album worth revisiting. Listen, question it, research it, challenge it, because sometimes the most interesting stories aren't the ones that give you an easy answer. They're the ones that make you ask another question. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure to like and subscribe to the Bars on Wax podcast for more deep dives into music, hip-hop, and the culture that shaped our generation. Until next time, and remember, let that record play.